Fascinating.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're talking about New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, all of them together. And the real takeaway, we talk about a theme every day, right, for our broadcast. The theme is they're going to coordinate, a coordinated collaborative approach. That's what we heard from Andrew Cuomo at the top of this. All of them at different stages. Let's not forget that not every state is the same in terms of its battle with the virus, but nonetheless, they understand because we're all so closely connected here. Just because you cross a border doesn't mean the virus doesn't, stay behind. That's not the way it works. So they understand how important it is in terms of reopening, coming back to this economy to work together, because you have people from all of these different states kind of crossing the borders all the time, often on a daily basis.
Well, and you and I know this from living in this area, and I think folks in our listening area who are outside of the Northeast maybe don't realize how closely tied together we are. You may be going to Rhode Island on your boat if all things go according to plan, and you and I are always going down to Washington or Philadelphia or various places in any case. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure, Carol.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is those governors, which we have, Jason and I, and really so many of us here at Bloomberg have talked increasingly about this whole idea of, we're seeing some progress in the numbers, hitting plateaus. This is all a great thing. But as New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said, it's the fight of our lives. We are not out of the woods yet. And this whole, staying at home, social distancing has enabled us to get to this place. But if we start to come undone, well, then the metrics that these models were all based on, they come undone as well. And that's, I feel like, the other thing. They want to all come back, right? And we don't know exactly what this new normal is in coming back. But this point is we're not quite there yet. And I said to you kind of offline, it'll be interesting to see what the 5 o'clock government task force update is on the virus from the president and his team, juxtaposed against what we're hearing from governors who are on the front line.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on that as well. And the rest of the day's headlines. For those headlines, let's get to Charlie Pellet for Bloomberg Business Flash. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. A truly historic day just in terms of the broadcast that we just had for you. And, of course, stay with Bloomberg Radio for the very latest. We have got you covered throughout this crisis. Here's what's going on. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all declining right now. Do want to pass along 2 additional headlines. So, first of all, from France, the French President Emmanuel Macron says he will extend the lockdown in France until May 11th. And another headline breaking moments ago, Bernie Sanders says he will endorse Joe Biden for president. Stocks lower across the board. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ very much in retreat, especially after last week, giving up some of the gains, with the S&P now down by 49 points, down 1.8%. We've got the Dow down 492 points, down 2.1%. NASDAQ down 42. That is a drop of 0.5%. 10-year down 730 seconds, yield 0.74%. Gold up 1.5%, up $24 the ounce at $17.22. Crude oil, a major story after that weekend OPEC Plus agreement. Crude now lower West Texas Intermediate. It is down 1.5%. WTI now at $22.37 a barrel. Recapping, equities lower with the S&P down 48, a drop there of 1.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, we heard from the public policy side of the equation, and as Charlie said, we'll continue to monitor that. But let's understand where we are medically and how that may inform the decision to reopen and how we ultimately do that. Dr. Andy Pekash is back with us. He is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health, as you might tell from the name. Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Mike Bloomberg, the founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Dr. Pekash, great to have you back with us.
Very much.
So you guys have been doing some remarkable work and really have become the gold standard when it comes to tracking the virus, the data that so many people are relying on. Help us understand where we are, especially in the context of these peaks or plateaus that you're hearing the governors talk about, and how that may inform both regional and national sort of getting back to business.
Yeah, well, everything's going to be focused on regions right now. Different regions of the countries are at different places in their curves. You can hear things from New York about there being plateaus going on there. Places like Texas are still in their increased stages. So this is going to be really focused on individual regions, counties, cities, portions of states, monitoring how the epidemic is progressing in those particular regions.
So, yes. Okay. So how do you anticipate, Dr. Pekash, that will roll out in real time? Especially when, Jason and I keep talking about this theme of, fear versus greed. You can feel it, the pressure to get the economy back open because we're starting to see some optimism in those numbers. And yet, those numbers are only getting better because we're all staying at home.
So what's going to have to come in parallel with the cases going down is going to be a continued increase in our testing. And that testing is going to come in two forms. It'll come in continued testing for people who were infected, so looking for the virus in these people. And then the second arm of that testing will be testing for antibodies, which will tell us if people actually were infected and are still maintaining some level of immunity to the virus. So those two tests are really going to help inform us in terms of how quickly we can start rolling out rolling back some of the public health interventions.
Okay, so you say that, and I feel like this has been the big question from day one.
Yeah.
Getting more and more testing out there. We're still just testing small quantities of our society. So help me understand then, when do we get to a level where we are testing enough people to safely and securely kind of start to go back to normal?
Well, as the number of cases starts to drop, that'll free up more tests to go out there and be able to test, to loosen our parameters for testing. So again, as the number of cases goes down, we'll be able to expand testing, and that'll be important because that'll help us keep a really good track of cases as they rebound when we start easing up on some of the public health interventions. We fully expect that as we let people come back into society and do their things, we'll see some uptick in cases. What we have to be is prepared then to identify those cases and isolate and quarantine those individuals instead of having the entire society undergo the same kind of public health interventions.
Are we going to need an app like China has that basically says, okay, I was tested, I'm okay?
Well, we have I'll say it's an advantage, and that we can see other parts of the world who are now past their peak and are trying to deal with things. And there's lots of different approaches there in terms of understanding who's immune, who can go out, and who's potentially getting exposed to virus in that plateau phase. So we have a lot of things to try to get working here, but we have some examples to use from countries in Southeast Asia where they have been able to control the virus.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment with Dr. Andy Pekash, professor of molecular microbiology and immunology. Man, I have a hard time saying that. At Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, of course, supported by Mike Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. We're going to go now to Boston, that city's mayor giving an update right now.
To our 911 call takers, dispatch workers, especially during this very critical time. And I want to thank everyone who practiced physical distancing and who wore a face mask covering yesterday and over the holiday weekend and every day, quite honestly. I want you to know that these are sacrifices that we're making now to make sure that we don't have too many more of these holidays separated by loved ones. The next 2 to 3 weeks are very critical to achieving our goal. This surge I've been talking about is in motion now. As of yesterday, the state's confirmed cases are 25,475 cases of coronavirus and 756 deaths. That's up 3,100 cases and 44 deaths since Friday. As of yesterday, we were at the city of Boston, 3,916 cases in Boston of residents of the city of Boston that tested positive for coronavirus. Our cases in Boston have more than doubled in the past 7 days. 52% of all of our cases of coronavirus came between April 5th and April 12th. According to some new models, the peak is projected to arrive closer to the end of April. We also had 14 more deaths over the weekend for a total of 58 residents of the city of Boston who have passed away. To every family who lost a loved one, our city is holding you in our hearts. We are sending our love and our prayers to you and your families, and we'll continue to work around the clock to prevent any future loss of life from this terrible virus. That's what's at stake, and that's what we're doing here. I've seen and I've watched over the last couple of days certain federal leaders talk about reopening the economy after May 1st. That's not only unrealistic, that's completely irresponsible. We are still in the very beginning of this surge. We have to stay focused. We are working hard and quickly as we can to get prepared to prevent further loss of life. Just another quick word on that is we all want to get back to work and we all want to go back to normal society. This is not the time to talk about that. Certainly when we feel that the surge is past us and we begin to start to see the light at the other end of the tunnel, we will start to continue to move forward. A good government would never stop their work as a whole anyway. Here at City Hall, even though we're on a skeleton crew, many of our people are working doing the city's business from home. So restarting the city government shouldn't be that hard. We are going to be working with the businesses when the time comes, but right now is not the right time to have those conversations. Because what's important for us right now is making sure that we have the medical capacity to care for vulnerable people. This weekend we opened Boston Hope Medical Center at the Boston Convention Center. I want to thank all of our partners, especially the construction crew who got it up and ready in 5 days. It has a total of 1,000 beds, 500 for homeless patients and 500 for hospitals. Our goal is not to need that many. As of Sunday evening, we had 45 patients, 29 total, 29 on the hospital side and 16 on the unsheltered side. It's already making a difference for those patients who our hospitals are at capacity. We're essentially concerned for our unsheltered residents during weather like this today. We expect rain into the evening and heavy winds that will die down overnight. We have few people on the streets because our efforts to bring additional shelter and expand our medical capacity is working. But there are still some people that want to stay outside, and we're concerned about their well-being. We encourage any unsheltered person to come inside. We'll help you find a shelter or help you access the services that you might need to keep you safe. We have daytime sites open at St. Francis House, Rosie's Place, Conlon Madero Center, and our own Boston Public Health Commission shelter. Many other programs offer to-go meals as well. We also have outreach teams on the streets from a number of sheltered agencies. I want to thank them for their support. Pine Street Inn, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, our Office of Recovery Services team here in City Hall, the Boston Police Department, and the Department of Neighborhood Development. I want to thank everyone who's looking out for our most vulnerable, especially during these very challenging times. As always, if you see a person who might be in trouble, we're asking you to call 911. I want to update you on our progress addressing racial and ethnic inequalities in the impact of this virus. Data is critical in this work. We need to know, and the community needs to know, what inequities are and what can be done about them. So we've been collecting and sharing race and ethnicity data in Boston and encouraging every jurisdiction to do the same. Those numbers are updated daily on the website if you go to boston.gov/coronavirus. That's boston.gov/coronavirus. This weekend, as I mentioned the other Friday, we put together a health equities task force, an equity task force, I should say, and we had our first meeting this weekend. This group is made up of leaders of color in the communities, including doctors, faith leaders, heads of community health centers. The task force will be reviewing our data to do better and better understand the equities that exist for Black, Latino, and Asian and immigrant populations. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're seeing increased numbers of positive cases of coronavirus in these communities. At our first meeting, we identified priority areas, including testing, collecting more data, community action, and understanding the economic impact. We already started putting the ideas into action because we know this work is moving quickly and urgently. I want to thank those leaders and those partnerships, and I want to thank all the elected officials that have expressed their concern and interest here, who've been working in partnership with us. A big part of ensuring equity is making sure that communities have access to screening and testing. And we have strong partners in the community that we can work with. We are working with the Whittier Street Health Center in Roxbury to help make testing more accessible for residents. Starting today, the center will be offering scheduled rapid result testing to all. Whittier Street has been a champion of reducing health disparities, and the majority of their clients are people of color.
All right, you've been listening to Boston Mayor Marty Walsh giving an update from that city, certainly striking a different tone, as he said himself, Carol, from what we've heard from the federal government in terms of getting toward reopening. You just tweeted it out, essentially saying, May 1st, not a chance.
Yeah, right. So I feel like, as I said before, it'll be interesting to hear what we get at 5 o'clock in terms of the federal government and what the president and his team have to say. I do want to bring back Dr. Andy Pekash, professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School of Public Health. Of course, the school is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg. So, Dr. Pekash, what do you think is the most important thing that's going on right now in terms of getting the virus under control?
Well, I think that the public health interventions that have been put in place all across the country are working. You know, it takes, because this virus has such a long incubation period, it takes 2 to 3 weeks before we start seeing the true effect of what we've been doing in terms of the numbers of cases and the numbers of fatalities. So things are working. Now's not the time to take our foot off the gas pedal. We need to keep these things going and drive this forward until we get past the peak in most parts of the country.
And so, Dr. Pekash, very basic question for you. You know, from the perspective of our listeners out there trying to live their everyday lives, what do you recommend in terms of masks? What do you recommend in terms of, like, people getting exercise? Can they go running with friends? Can they take a walk? Like, what should people be thinking about? What have we learned about this virus that maybe is helping us refine what social distancing and what our interaction in public, as limited as it is, should be?
Yeah, so getting outside, walking around, running, exercising outside is fantastic. Keep your social distance from people. Try not to run next to each other. Try not to get too close to people as you're talking. But getting out and exercising is a wonderful thing to sort of break the monotony of being inside all the time. If you're going out for your grocery runs or to do something else, essential, it's great to have a mask on. The CDC has now updated its guidance and wants everybody to be wearing masks when they go out, even just cloth ones. Again, that happened because we're realizing how many people are having mild symptoms but still able to spread the virus. So this is really meant to try to capture that small percentage of the population that might be spreading the virus and not know it. Again, now is not the time to let up on these things.
Yeah.
It may be difficult, but we have to keep going.
So, okay, I do wonder how our world has changed. I mean, it's obviously changed in a lot of different ways, but, I mean, is it all about getting a vaccine so that we can ultimately really get this under control? Is that the final solution to this? Or is it a case of, it's going to mutate and we start all over again?
Well, right now it doesn't look like this virus is going to go away anytime soon. So a real important key our tool will be to get a vaccine, because when we have a vaccine, that's when we can go out and really start immunizing the vulnerable parts of our population and really make a big dent in terms of the disease that's being caused and the disease severity in the population. We'll have to see how things go over the next few months as more and more people become immune to the infection, and how the virus will be spreading at those times.
But does that also mean then big gatherings, whether it's sports events, going back to college, like things like that, they cannot happen for a while?
Really large gatherings, there's very little chance that can be put back in place anytime in the near foreseeable future, because what we're seeing from other parts of the country or from other parts of the world is that the virus never really goes away like we see with influenza. It seems to be hanging around at all parts of the year, and once it goes through the population, there's still some people left around who are spreading the virus. So gradual rollbacks of some of the public health interventions may be occurring, but I don't foresee going back to 70,000 person football games in the near future.
Yeah, it's really amazing. We hear about that and hear about what the new normal may ultimately look like. Dr. Andy Pekash, thank you so much. Great to catch up with you again. Always such a great voice to bring us the real scoop on what's going on out there, especially as we start to wrestle with some really big questions related to what it looks like on the other side of this. He is professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. As you can tell, it is supported by Mike Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies.
Great resource. They have all been, and Dr. Pekosh included. All right, let's get back to your top business stories, and let's see what's going on with the trading day. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Oh, what's going on is we are lower across the board here. Carol Master, happy Monday to you both. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all slumping. Stocks are declining right now with the S&P 500 index down 46, a drop there of 1.7%. The Dow is down 461, down by 2%, and NASDAQ down 34. That is a drop of 0.4%. After the best week since 1974, the S&P 500 index lower with all of its major groups down today. Oil fluctuating as investors weigh whether an unprecedented deal by the world's biggest producers to cut output could stabilize the market. Right now we've got West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.1%, $22.51 a barrel. Gold up 1.5%, $17.21 the ounce. The 10-year down 7/30 seconds, yield there 0.74%. So again, recapping the equity numbers here, lower across the board. The Dow is down 492 points, down 2.1%. S&P down 48, down 1.7%. NASDAQ down 38, a drop there of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and even just in the first little bit of our show here, Carol, we have heard from 6 major governors across the region, the mayor of Boston, and one of the leading health experts on this virus. It feels like, and I feel like we say this every week, this is going to be a really important and pivotal week in terms, this week, I think, of deciding what and how we start to get back to business, or at least lay out a plan. You know, interestingly, we didn't really get to this detail earlier, but I wanted to point it out. What Governor Cuomo said was that each of those governors represented on that call is going to appoint a public health official as well as his or her chief of staff, essentially to a council that is going, a committee of sorts, a commission, however you want to describe it, that is going to come up with a plan for these 6 states to move forward economically.
It's all about coordination. And they're working together. And it was really, I think, for me as a citizen of one of those states, kind of comforting to hear them working together and figuring it out, because there's so many issues to consider. I have to say, I was just following Twitter, and my brother just tweeted, everyone should buy stamps. And it was in response to somebody saying, listen, these postal workers are out there on the front line, you know, delivering our packages, you know, delivering our mail. But Jason, it's a tricky time for them.
It absolutely is. A fantastic story coming up in this edition of Bloomberg Business Week magazine, but you can read it now online and on the Bloomberg terminal. Devin Leonard wrote it, projects and investigations reporter for Bloomberg Business Week. He joins us on the phone from New Jersey, as does Joel Weber, the editor of the magazine. He joins us on the phone from Brooklyn. And Joel, I want to start with you. Devin is our go-to guy figuring things out in terms of the government. He certainly has been over the last couple of years. We've relied heavily on him. What teed up this story for you?
Well, I mean, Devin's actually written a book about the Postal Service. So that was like the one where I was, in the middle of all this, I was like getting mail, and I was just so looking forward to getting my mail every day. And I was like, what's going on with the Postal Service right now? And so it's like sometimes it feels like I had this like bat phone, and I get to call certain people and ask for help. And so Devin was obviously top of mind a couple of weeks ago when we spooled this up. And you know, I think it's just a really compelling story because there are certain humans that are really on the front lines right now, and the Postal Service is really that. And it's you know, absolutely essential form of communication still. And they're also not getting the support that you might expect. Devin, how does that? What did you learn about that on that front?
Well, I mean, look, it's probably the nation's oldest essential service, and you know, you get your mail through. Well, I guess as you were saying, you know, neither rain nor snow nor coronavirus, and you know, even when a disaster happens, when you know, mail delivery stops, like 9/11 or Katrina or something like that. Once you see those letter carriers, you know, going around the street, that's when you have a sense of, you know, oh my God, we're back to normal. And you know, this is a really tough situation because, like, you know, doctors, nurses, cops, firefighters, you know, the people who work for the Postal Service, they're providing an essential service, but they didn't have, you know, the masks, the gloves, the hand sanitizer that they needed, but they had to go out in the midst of this crisis, and you know, A lot of people are getting sick. People weren't going to work. But as you say, we're still getting our mail. It's just kind of amazing.
I have to say, just like Joel, I mean, there is something in my home too. It's like, oh, the mail came, or package, because it's just it's the world we're living in right now. The thing is, Devin, the U.S. Postal Service has been struggling for some time, and as you rightfully write about, it's here we need them more than ever, and yet the future continues to be so uncertain for the U.S. Postal Service.
Well, Carol, you're right. They were in trouble before this. They've been in trouble for a while, pretty much, almost 2 decades now. But right now, they're just getting hit really hard, like so many other governments, so many other businesses in the United States, by just a total, drop off in business. I guess we found out just on Thursday, Megan Brennan, the Postmaster General, told Congress that they expect mail volume to drop, on a year-over-year basis by 50%, by the summertime. So they were already in a tenuous financial situation. They've told Congress that they might run out of money as early as June. So, what is the question? And Congress did just allow them to, with the approval of President Trump, allow them to borrow $10 billion more dollars. But I don't think that's enough. Also, just borrowing more money doesn't solve their problem. Congress has to do something to really change their business model to get them out of it.
And Devin, what role does the private sector play in all this? Because, we think about Amazon, we think about all that we're relying on in terms of delivery here, but take us into that side of it, sort of the private versus public.
Well, the UPS, FedEx, and now Amazon. Well, now Amazon's more recent. Of course, they've been doing this for a while. They deliver a lot of packages, but in terms of overall mail volume, they don't deliver anywhere near the volume that the United States Postal Service does. And also, right, the Postal Service has to hit every address in the country 6 times a day. 6 days a week. And also, sometimes on Sunday now. So if you were just to do away with the Postal Service, those private sector companies, would serve the urban areas and areas where there's a lot of volume where they can make money. But they wouldn't do everything the Postal Service does.
And so how does this get resolved? I mean, because we also see, and you alluded to this, the president did step in, but at the same time, he's been very skeptical about how all of this works and how the U.S. Postal Service fits in. What's the next step in all this?
Well, look, I mean, what really needs to happen is something, this should have happened a while ago, is that, Congress needs to, basically revamp the Postal Service's business model so they have more control over costs, so they can raise revenues. They have no real control over their pricing, but that's not going to happen right now. With this crisis, an economic crisis along with a health crisis. So, right, I think in the end they're going to get bailed out, which is what Trump didn't want to have happen. And a lot of Republicans too, but I don't think they really have much choice. And also when we're talking about voting by mail in November, I mean, they need a lifeline. Even though they're the ones, the Postal Service itself, are saying we need a new business model. They're not just asking for money.
Well, does the world feel like we still need it? I mean, in terms of the way we communicate, I mean, what's the thinking from some of the experts that you talk to, Devin?
Well, I mean, you make a really good point, which is that when's the last time you wrote a letter? The Postal Service was more important to Americans a century ago, 2 centuries ago, when it was the main way that people communicated. But even now, we need it for a lot of basic things. We need packages. There is still some hard copy mail that we need. You just can't get rid of it for the reasons I was saying. But also we get medicine and things like that. And there's all these people. I shouldn't say there's all these people. Well, there's a fair amount of people in the country who don't really have internet yet. So rural areas. So I mean there is an argument in some circles that it should be privatized. It's happened in Germany. It's happened in Great Britain. It's happened in Sweden, and it works there. But we're just so far from we're so far away, from even sort of contemplating that here, that to sort of propose it and say that solution and we need to do it tomorrow. That's just not going to happen.
It's just, it's amazing, Joel, like something we just take for granted, right? Or just assume, but it's the times have changed a lot over the last decade.
For sure, but the other thing that I just want to say that Devin, and this warrants everyone reading it really, is there's also like this labor element on top of it, and I think one of the other things that Devin did a great job of bringing to light here is like what it's like to actually be organizing on behalf of the Postal Service amid all of this. And so just on that note, that's like another fascinating element of the story that is just some great nuance from Devin.
Well, definitely check out the story, everyone. There's so much details. Also check out his book as well on the U.S. Postal Service. Our thanks to Devin Leonard, Projects and Investigations reporter at Bloomberg Business Week, joining us on the phone along with Jill Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week. And for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco and watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. And be sure to check out that story online on the Bloomberg Terminal and also in the magazine when it hits on newsstands this Thursday. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. We're going to get a check on the day's economic news and the bond market. That's coming up in just a moment.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 2019, Greg Popovich surpasses Lenny Wilkins to become the all-time winningest coach in NBA history with his 1,413th win.
One is in the books. The Spurs hang on to steal it. Greg Popovich with 1,413 career wins, the most in NBA history.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Wi-Fi connection spotty? Make sure you're never without something to listen to by offlining your podcasts on TuneIn. Just tap the three dots to download the episodes you want to hear. You'll find your offlined audio under your favorites.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spit and Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup.
You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading. We do have the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all declining. Stocks are slumping before the start of one of the most uncertain earnings seasons on record as the coronavirus pandemic rattles the global economy. Here's where we stand. S&P 500 index down 40 points. That is a drop of 1.5%. The Dow is down 411 points, down 1.7%. NASDAQ down 16, a drop there of 0.2%. The 10-year down 9/30 seconds with a yield of 0.74%. After its best week since 1974, the S&P 500 index is lower with all of its major groups down. Oil is fluctuating as investors weigh whether an unprecedented deal by the world's biggest producers to cut output could stabilize the market. West Texas Intermediate crude down now by 1% at $22.50 a barrel. Gold is up 1.4% at $17.20 the ounce. As the coronavirus pandemic hits the U.S. economy, the Federal Reserve has been responding aggressively, launching emergency programs supporting $2.3 trillion in loans. We spoke exclusively earlier today with Fed Vice Chairman Richard Clarida.
We have these lending facilities in place because of these unusual and exigent circumstances, and we'll use our authority forcefully and aggressively until the economy is recovered. But at that point, we'll be prepared and we'll be able to put these tools away when the economy is well on their way to the road to recovery. And I just do not see that as being an issue in the present circumstance.
Goldman Sachs says U.S. stocks are unlikely to make fresh lows thanks to the, quote, do-whatever-it-takes approach of policymakers. Sources tell Bloomberg Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is not budging on strict guidelines for airlines wanting taxpayer aid. Airline shares are trading lower right now with UAL down 8.9%. We've got Delta lower now by 6.2%. Southwest is lower by 6.5%. In Delaware, True Religion Apparel has filed for bankruptcy. Again, recapping, equities lower, S&P down by 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
And you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on Bloomberg Radio. Let's do a little Business Week economics. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg, joins us on the phone from the Poconos. Yelena Shalecheva, Senior U.S. Economist from Bloomberg Economics. She's on the phone from Long Island. And you just heard a bit of the exclusive interview that we had earlier today with Fed Vice Chair Richard Clarida. Let's listen to a little bit more of that, where he talked about where interest rates are right now.
We're going to keep rates where they are, which is basically very close to zero, until the economy is on track to achieve its maximum employment and price stabilities. And so the path of the economy is going to dictate ultimately the path of rates.
All right, and that was, of course, Richard Clarida. Carol?
All right, we do want to take you to New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy giving an update on his state and the virus. Of course, let's listen in.
Thanks, Governor. It does look somewhat nasty out there. As you know, there is a tornado watch into effect until 6 p.m. for 16 of our 21 counties. I won't go through them all, but it's kind of the 5 northeastern that are not under that tornado watch. The difference between the watch and a warning is really the watch is about broad areas where conditions could exist for the development of a twister or tornado. The warning are like a highly localized where we see that the tornado is imminent. So beyond that, wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour kind of making their way from Delaware north towards the Poconos. We've already had a lot of flooding in Hunterdon, Burlington County. We have a partial building collapse in North Hanover, Patterson, partial building collapse. The boardwalk by the Wildwood Convention Center has some damage to it. So between the high winds, the thunderstorms, and the expected hail, it is going to be nasty out there. The only good news, Governor, is tomorrow's supposed to be a lot nicer. And currently we're dealing with about just over 47,000 power outages from the north to the south part of the state. Governor?
Pat, thank you. I got some pictures texted to me by Congressman Van Drew in the Wildwood reality. it's really clipped us in a bunch of different places. Again, if folks see a down power line, don't go near it, please God. Call it in to your utility provider. If your power goes out, don't assume your neighbor called it in. You please call it in yourselves. And we don't want you out right now, period, even if it were sunny and 75 degrees, but certainly don't go out unless you absolutely have to over the balance of the afternoon. So I appreciate that, Pat. Thank you. So again, welcome. I'm joined today by the woman to my right who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Judy Persicelli. To her right, Department of Health Communicable Disease Service Medical Director, Dr. Ed Lifshitz. Both great to have both of you with us. The aforementioned, already introduced, Superintendent of the State Police, Colonel Pat Callahan. Director of the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, Jared Maples, is with us. Deputy Counsel Paramel Garg to answer questions. Again, thank you for your patience today. Let's start, as we have been over the past couple of weeks, with the overnight numbers. Since yesterday's report, we have been notified that 3,219 more residents have received positive test results. Remember, our first positive test case was reported on March 4th. And since then, now there's a total of 64,584 New Jerseyans who have tested positive. According to our online dashboard, accessible through covid19.nj.gov, as of 10 p.m. last night, 7,781 residents were reported hospitalized. I get that right, Judy? Of whom 1,886 were listed in critical or intensive care, and 1,611 ventilators were in use. And for the 24-hour period ending at 10 p.m. last night, happily 556 residents were discharged. And we celebrate this with them and their families. Their successful battle against COVID-19 gives us continual hope for our larger war against this enemy. To quote a New Jersey icon, Mr. Bon Jovi, who says you can't go home. As it must be noted, the dashboard pulls data as it is reported each night by hospitals to the New Jersey Hospital Association. There may be overnight changes or late reports, as Judy, I'm sure, will agree with, that are not yet reflective in that data. So these numbers are just a snapshot, literally, in time. Sadly, we must also report that we have lost another precious 94 souls to COVID-19 related complications. We have now lost a total of 2,443 members, blessed members of our New Jersey family. To put that in perspective, that is more than the number of New Jerseyans who gave their lives in the combination of the Korean and Vietnam wars. To give you some sense of the staggering toll that this has had on the loss of life. Every day, no matter what, this number hits us right square in the gut. And these aren't and never will be abstract numbers. They are real people who leave behind families whose hurt cannot be properly described. Our hearts are with every family. I just got off the phone with a very, very close friend of mine in New Jersey whose brother is being taken off a ventilator as we speak. He's being given last rites, 56 years old. I mean, it's just, the stories and the tragedy are overwhelming and extraordinary. Let me give you a couple of stories of the folks who passed since we last gathered. On February 10th, 1984, the Reverend Dr. W. Lewis McDowell, there is the Reverend, founded the Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church in Passaic and had led its congregation since that very day. Reverend McDowell was born in Hawkinsville, Georgia, but he and his late wife, Sanella, with whom he is now reunited, bless them both, called New Jersey home. And it is here where they raised their daughters, Deaconess Andra Lisa, with whom I spoke earlier today, and Reverend Pamela Denise. Over the years, Mount Pilgrim has grown into a cornerstone of the community, serving far more than just the spiritual needs of its congregation. This is the legacy Reverend McDowell leaves. May God bless him, his daughters and grandchildren, and the entire Mount Pilgrim community. Patterson police officer Pat Francesco Scorpo, there he is, God love him, was only 34 years old when we lost him on Saturday. He was only 3 months shy of making his 5th anniversary as a police officer. He will be remembered first and foremost as a loving son, husband and father, but he will also be remembered as an exemplary police officer who served his community with great pride. Our prayers and deepest thoughts are with his wife, Christina, with whom I had the honor of speaking earlier today, and his young sons, Francisco Jr. and Santino. I think Francisco Jr., if I'm correct, is 4 years old, and Santino is 6 months. So to his wife, and his 2 sons, as well as his mother and father, Anna and Sam, we send our prayers. Philip Dover, there he is, was an NJ Transit bus operator, having joined the ranks in 1996. He was a proud member of the Amalgamated Transit Union and is sadly their first member to pass because of COVID-19. He served our state and the thousands upon thousands of riders over the past 24 years who depended on him. And he did all of that, serving with distinction. He leaves behind his mother, May, and his brother, Mark, who I had the honor of speaking with earlier as well. And finally, I send condolences to Patterson Mayor Andre Sayegh, who has been quite public with his own positive, there's Andre the Giant in the middle, with his own positive diagnosis of COVID-19, who lost his uncle to his left in this picture, John Obiji, a Syrian immigrant who became a successful chemical engineer. His story is the story of New Jersey and of America. Mayor Sayegh and his family are in my prayers and our prayers, and I know in the thoughts of many others. These are just 4 of the now well more than 2,400 stories that we could sit here and tell. We honor every lost life, and we will do everything in our power to ensure that we come out of this emergency with more of our family intact. There is literally no amount of money that is too high to pay to save a life. Our hearts are heavy, yet they are also unbowed. We have to continue practicing our social distancing. We're already weeks into this, and certainly it isn't any more fun, and we have many more ahead of us. We simply cannot get complacent. We can't let our vigilance slip. But let's look at this map as we've been looking at from time to time. That map looks better every time we bring it up, and that is a cause of hope. This is the shading depends on the amount of time it takes to double infections in any one of the 21 counties in New Jersey. We first showed this to you. It was orange, and there's only one county left that's orange, and red. And now it's one orange, some yellow, and a lot of that shaded light gray. That is good news. Our job is to make sure all 21 counties, first and foremost, get to be as light a shade as possible. And our collective efforts have taken many parts of the state, as I said, from red to where it looks today, and that's good. It means, as I said, the rate of new cases and of transmission is slowing. But if we let up, it can just as easily become red again. There's an enormous amount of discussion about when are we going to peak. When can my kids? I just got another very impassioned note from a mom. I don't know who she is, but she's pleading with us to let kids play sports. When can we open up our economy? When can we open up our society? We are trying at every single step of the way, and have been since January, trying to make our decisions based on the facts as they sit before us, based on the data, based on the science. And there is no question we don't get to that point of economic recovery, of societal recovery, unless it is on the back of a healthcare recovery. Our jobs right now collectively, first and foremost, is to put the fire out in the house. And we are still not there yet. While the case, Judy you, and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, while the curve that fits into the amount of positive cases is undeniably now flattening. The increase day over day today to yesterday was 4%. That's been our lowest day over day increase since this all started. It is still rising. These cases are still rising. We have got to hit that plateau and then aggressively bring it down back on the other side. And we only do that, and again, I'm begging with everybody, we only do that if you all stay home. Just literally stay home. Not just because of the weather today, but Pat tells us tomorrow will be better weather. So even in the good weather days, we need you to stay home and stay away from each other even when you are at home. And that allows the number of infections to be lower, which means the number of hospitalizations are lower and the amount of critical care beds required are lower, and please God, the fatalities are lower. And as we do that, this allows Judy and Pat and Ed and others to build out the healthcare capacity such that those lines cross at a reasonable level and at a reasonable date. We are right in the thick of it, folks. We cannot take our foot off the gas. Now, our efforts, I mentioned over here, to prepare our healthcare system and capacity, our efforts are continuing to prepare our state and for the potential of up to, you ready? In the worst case models right now, 36,000 residents needing to be hospitalized, 6,000 of them needing a ventilator. Our job, the collective 9 million of us, the many as it were, our job is to make sure we pound the curve from a worst case scenario down to what looks much more like a best case scenario. But that's not on automatic pilot. That's up to us in our actions. And so far, that map tells us that we are making progress. The flattening of that curve of positive tests tells us that we're making progress. We have to stay at it. I would love nothing more than to someday look back, and say we over-prepared. That'll be the best mistake any of us ever made. But we don't have that luxury right now, because we know that if we stop doing what we're doing, even one bit, COVID-19 can boomerang on us and bring about the worst case scenario. So let's stick together and let's keep working together. It is clearly working. It's how we get that map to look entirely the color we want it to look. And it's now that we protect doctors and nurses and first responders and essential workers. So stay with it, folks. What we're doing is clearly working. Just keep your foot on the gas, stay home, stay away from each other, and we will win this war. Unequivocally, we will win this war. Switching gears for a couple of announcements, if I may. Before joining you all here, and this is one of the reasons that we were late getting started today, I held a conference call with Governors Cuomo, Lamont, Wolf, Carney, and Raimondo to announce the formation of a regional advisory board or council to coordinate not only our cooperative mitigation efforts, which we have been very successful in doing.
All right, you have been listening to New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. The second time you've heard his voice on this program today, because as he was just speaking about in his briefing, he was part of that sixth governor briefing that we kicked off our show with. So clearly governors remain front and center in fighting this virus, Carol.
Yeah, absolutely. And to hear some of the numbers, though, still staggering. And so, really kind of reiterating what we heard earlier about, it's still a huge problem. And to think about how we get out on the other side, it's going to take some time. All right. Watching, though, the economy for us, the bond market, we do want to bring in our team, get some Business Week economics. Kathleen Hayes is Global Economics and Policy Editor at Bloomberg News. She's on the phone from the Poconos, along with Yelena Shiletyeva, our Senior U.S. Economist at Bloomberg Economics, on the phone from Long Island. Kathleen, Poconos, how's the weather there? Because I know we were just talking about tornadoes and concerns.
Stormy. I don't think it's as bad as what Phil Murphy, governor of New Jersey, was just talking about, some of the things he's seen. A lot of rain, a lot of wind. We'll see what happens next. But it's kind of an interesting backdrop for everything that's going on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Gray and dismal. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing here in the bond market and how folks are, maybe some of the conversations around the U.S. economy, the global economy. I know we heard from Rich Clarida. We've played a couple of sound bites from what he had to say. And it sounds like, he said, we're putting the tools away right now because, until the economy's on its way to recovery, we don't really need to think about, in terms of, getting the economy back open.
Well, certainly no rate hikes. I mean, you ask him about that, any Fed official is going to tell you that's way down the road. We're just going to sit near zero. We've launched lots and lots of emergency lending programs. Interesting story. on Bloomberg today about how there's deals coming in the junk bond market today, right? And of course, on Thursday, that was one of the big things. Oh my gosh, the Fed's going to backstop the junk bond market. And that's another thing Rich Clarida did repeat. Look, yes, we're going in this foray into junk, but these are companies that were investment grade that have fallen below investment grade because of everything going on with the virus. I think that's very important. This was also a reassuring speech in the vein of what Jay Powell gave last week on NBC when he said, we're going to get through this, and there's certainly the prospects for a strong recovery. I think it's interesting, actually, that the U.S. Treasury market is selling off a bit this afternoon with the 30-year bond back up to 1.38. It's down about a full point. The 10-year down a quarter of a point, especially on a day when stocks have pulled back. As you know, people are getting really worried about earnings. And I think a couple things this week. Retail sales tomorrow. Let's get Yelena on that in a quick second. And the beige book. But, we always watch earnings as well as a micro view of what's happening with companies. And I think when you try to figure out what's going on with the economy now, what the Fed's looking at, that's another way where earnings are going to play into the mix.
Yelena, come on in on that. We do get retail sales. We have some other data points. Of course, everything's always skewed because of the virus. What are you going to be watching?
Sure. Hi, Carol. So far the depth of the crisis has been evident in unprecedented increase in jobless claims, which we were watching week to week, right? We already saw 17 million increase in jobless claims. This week, actually, we're going to get some data, some monthly data, which will confirm how big this crisis is in terms of economic consequences. So we're going to get industrial production, we're going to get housing starts. They will show how badly the business sector is doing. But as you and Kathleen mentioned, we're going to get retail sales on Wednesday. And we estimate an unprecedented decline in retail sales, which will in turn show how big of an impact this crisis is having on the key driver of economic growth, the consumer. So we expect 15% decline in retail sales in March. And previously, the biggest drop recorded was back in 2008 when retail sales fell by 4%. So this will really be unprecedented. So obviously, a lot of weakness will be concentrated in discretionary items, which will be only partially offset by some strength in internet shopping for essentials. But that's how retail sales will look like. And if our forecast proves correct, then consumer spending for the quarter overall, for the first quarter, will be negative, implying that GDP growth will be negative as well.
So, Kathleen, last word to you. Anything else we need to be looking out for on the economic front? I mean, obviously, it's all about reopening, but where are you looking either in terms of where the market may give us a signal or some data?
Good question. Yeah, well, again, I think that reopening is super important. We did discuss this, the Northeast governors talking about a regional advisory. So, everybody's trying to look at it, and we just have to watch the virus numbers to see what happens. I think sometimes people are just a bit maybe too opposed to the idea that this is inevitable, it's important. At any rate, that we're all watching that. Again, I think the Fed's beige book, which is often kind of a back burner thing because we'll get these anecdotal reports on Wednesday from the 12 regional district banks. Leading indicators, I believe, they're out this week as well. We don't watch that one as much. We'll watch it more. I think that these are you just watch the numbers, and I think for the stock market, it's very interesting. Are people going to have priced in all the damage to the economy and just slide past it, will the bulls keep buying stocks? I talk to a lot of economists who just don't buy it. They think that when we start getting more of these numbers, that's what's going to make the bulls in the stock market sit back and think twice, just as earnings are. We're seeing that today as well.
All right, Kathleen Hayes, thank you so much. Global economics and policy editor at Bloomberg News, along with Yelena Shalecheva, senior U.S. economist at Bloomberg Economics. Let's get back to the world of business and a check on the trading day. Here is once again Charlie Bellett.
All right, thank you very much. We've got 37 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell here. Stocks are slumping before a foggy earnings season. We've got the S&P down now by 37 points, a drop of 1.3%. The Dow slumping 395, down 1.7%, and NASDAQ down 6. That is a drop there. In fact, a little change right now, down less than 0.1%. 10 years down 10/30 seconds. Yield on the 10-year, 0.75%. Gold up 1.4%, 17.20 the ounce. And crude, West Texas Intermediate, trading lower, down 7 cents, down 0.3%. So again, recapping after the best week since 1974, it is a down Monday with the S&P down 36, down 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser, here with you on a very dreary, to say the least, Monday, dreary to the point where these storms moving through the Northeast are really wreaking havoc. And, you know, that's just what we need right now is some natural
just put
disasters.
It on the list.
Exactly. All right, Andy Brown is with us. He's a little further north than we are, up in New Hampshire. He is, of course, editorial director of Bloomberg New Economy. He joins us on the phone. So, Andy, take a look around at the world and tell us what you see, because we are seeing different leaders. We've heard from a lot of them today step into the breach here, governors especially, some mayors here and there. But take a global view of this. What are we learning about leadership?
Yeah, so, you know, the story that we've all been listening to in recent years about leadership and power in the 21st century has been very much a binary one. East versus West, China versus the U.S., the incumbent power versus the challenger. And the big unknown is, will they go to war as they struggle over global supremacy? And, you know, I mean, this story has never been particularly satisfactory because it's never taken into account the wishes of smaller yet still pretty powerful regional countries and economies like India and Japan and Australia and the Middle East, Iran. But, you know, this coronavirus seems to have completely blown this narrative out of the water. You know, it is now clearer than ever that neither the United States nor China have the aptitude right now for global leadership, nor, frankly, do they seem to have much appetite for it.
Andy, take a step back, though, because last week you guys kicked off Bloomberg New Economy Conversation Series, which was an online gathering, folks from more than 60 countries. You had some really high-profile people talking. Obviously, leadership came up in this. I am curious, you know, who you guys talked to and some other main topics that kind of came away from that discussion.
Yeah, this really, I would say this was the main conclusion to emerge. And we had Joe Nye, who's the architect of this concept of soft power. We had Michel Flournoy, who was the former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense and may well have been a Defense Secretary had Hillary Clinton won the last election. And Jason Furman, who was, President Obama's, one of President Obama's chief economic aides. But this issue of leadership came up again and again, and how the U.S. and China have performed in this global once-in-a-century crisis. And frankly, both China and the U.S. came in for a battering, you know. I mean, so on the Chinese side, yeah, sure, the economy is substantially up and running, and China is now in a position to provide aid to some parts of the world, even though they're scoring all kinds of propaganda points out of it. But, you know, the world will never forget that the corona outbreak began in Wuhan, and, you know, Wuhan was saturated with this virus, and this virus was being carried to the rest of China and the whole world, while local officials there were engaged in a cover-up, you know, and by the same token, you know, the point was made that neither will the world forget the images that we're seeing right now in real time coming out of the United States, you know, demonstrating the frailties and the fragilities of multiple systems in the U.S. I mean, the healthcare system, you know, doctors in emergency rooms wearing ski goggles and nurses wrapping themselves up in garbage bags, and, you know, the failures of of governance with the fumbled response from federal government, patchwork response in states. You talk about states, you know, where red states and blue states apparently going in different directions, and one part of America locked down out in Florida, still partying out on the beaches and so on. And then the social systems, the long food lines now, and this is really shocking to people all around the world who are looking at the richest and most powerful country in the history of the world.
One thing in the column that you wrote too, Andy, that really jumped out for me, and this was from something Jason Furman said, who said no economy will be safe until the entire world has this pandemic under control. I mean, this whole idea of, we just heard from 6 governors in the New York metro area because they are talking about, in order to reopen the economy, you have to have a coordinated event, and response. You can't just, everybody come up with their own plan. And we really need that on a global scale, and we're lacking in that.
That's exactly right, Carol. That's the point that not just Jason, but they were all making, that this is a common challenge and requires a collaborative approach. And what's truly depressing about this is that it is not at all the only global challenge, common challenge that we face. If this is the botched, failed response that we've seen to coronavirus, what about an even bigger crisis, which is climate? What hope is there for global collaboration on that?
It's so interesting you bring that up, because I do wonder about things like climate and cooperation going forward. We have a promo running about Bloomberg Green saying, this is the biggest crisis of our time. It's like, it is one of the biggest crises of our time at this point. So only about 40 seconds left here. Andy, what does this portend for U.S.-China relationship? Just to take us all the way back to the beginning, where does U.S.-China go from here?
So U.S.-China, I'm afraid it just digs these two countries deeper into a hole. I mean, it almost is almost literally another nail in the coffin. And then one of the conclusions from our inaugural conversation was, what does future power look like? I mean, and it's likely to be, there's a vacuum, anarchy, law of the jungle, at best a regional response to what ought to be what ought to be a joined up, coordinated, global effort against common problems.
All right. Andy Brown, thank you so much, editorial director of New Economy, joining us on the phone from New Hampshire. Hope you continue to stay safe. Carol?
I love how he writes, the holes in our healthcare system. And then also when it comes to emerging markets, we need to be helping them out. All right. Do check out that column on Bloomberg.com. Right now, let's check out your top business stories. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there. We've got 29 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell, all working from home with stocks slumping before the start of one of the most uncertain earnings seasons on record. Traders are, quote, flying into earnings season without instruments, certainly like the weather in the Northeast right now. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. They are all trading lower. Here's where we stand. S&P 500 index down 31, a drop there of 1.1%. The Dow is down 347 points, a decline right now of 1.5%. NASDAQ, though, has turned around since our last update, higher now by 17 points. That is a gain of just about 0.2%. We've got the 10-year down 11/30 seconds. The yield 0.75%. Gold up 1.3%, 17.18 the ounce on gold. And crude oil has been fluctuating as investors weigh whether that unprecedented deal by the world's biggest producers to cut output could stabilize the market. Right now, West Texas Intermediate crude is lower by 0.4%, $22.66 a barrel. Well, as New York City grapples with the coronavirus, one of the great unknowns is just how rapidly it will spread to other big cities across the country. Dr. Joshua Sharstein is Vice Dean of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television.
Well, what's really remarkable to me is how so many people believe that what's happening there, meaning somewhere else, isn't going to happen here, meaning where I live. And nobody should really have that sense of confidence. People felt like, well, it's in China, it couldn't come to Italy. It's in Italy, it couldn't come to the U.S. But, it could go anywhere. Any city could be affected. Letting our guard down here, it would be a terrible mistake.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. AutoNation has granted Chief Executive Officer Cheryl Miller a leave of absence for health reasons and said its longtime former CEO, Mike Jackson, will replace her until she returns. AutoNation shares down by about 4.5%. Again, recapping equities, lower S&P 500 index down 28, down 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. One headline that crossed amid all of that, Carol, speaking of the coordination efforts we're seeing here on the East Coast, the governors of Washington, Oregon, and California forming a similar group to sort of coordinate there. So it
think
feels
they were
like
talking. You think they were talking over the weekend?
Yeah, so seeming to see a pattern forming here across the country, certainly on the coast. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. This is Bloomberg.
Here with his chart of the day. I don't have a clue.
Jason?
Oh my God, Dave, I'm so embarrassed that I can't come up with
this is definitely more in your range, Jason, than it is for Carol. There's no question.
What does that mean?
Well, it's not
it's a
classic
matter
rock.
of when the music came out. What generation? You know, the other day you were talking about all the 70s bands you grew to appreciate. I mean, this is not a 70s band. This is Jane's Addiction.
Jane's Addiction? Oh, I was going to say it. Shoot. All right, good
sure
job.
you were. Talk is cheap, as they say.
I know.
In any case. But why pick that, you know? Here we go. That's where we are again, looking at how the S&P 500 has performed. You know, there's so much focus on 20% moves for benchmark indexes, you know, that, okay, we're up 20%, we're in a bull market, we're down 20%, we're in a bear market. Well, it's not really that simple these days. And I started out looking at this table from LPL Financial. They had in a report last week that sort of looked at the extent to which the S&P 500 rose during bear market rallies. And what you see when you look at the most recent bear markets before the current one, so you're going back to 2000 to 2002, and then in 2007 to 2009, in both those periods, you had gains of more than 20% in the S&P 500 in the midst of the bear market. It happened in September 2001 to January 2002. It was up 21%. And then started falling again. We saw the same thing happen November 2008 to January 2009. That gain was 24%. And then you had a couple of months more of a bear market until it was all over. So, you know, the idea that we had a 25% gain in the S&P 500 through the end of last week, does that mean you're sounding all clear? You know, you have some people we're back in a bull market. It is not that simple. And maybe at a minimum, we need to start talking about 25% instead of 20. I don't know. Or maybe we just need to really kind of look at the markets and not just have some kind of a automatic trigger for when things change. And given that we're down today, it's certainly consistent with the idea that it's not up and away from here necessarily. Now, it could happen, but at least from recent history, you have to kind of take a step back and say, maybe not. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
I also do wonder the big swings that we see, right? I feel like it's not like some of the sell-offs we've seen in the past where you were really worried about maybe a longer economic downturn, or it feels different to me, Dave. And I mean, I still think that there's a lot of questions about how we recover from this, and we won't know till we start to come back. And, you know, people get back to work, people get back to buying on a kind of a more normal level, but we don't know, right? And the market will obviously reflect some of that. But we just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you go back to the previous bear market, that 24% gain I talked about, I mean, we were a year into a recession almost, as it turned out, by the time you got that rally. And, you know, if anything, there's a recession that's just come upon us. So it's a different sort of time frame we're talking about here. Now, it'll be interesting to see if indeed past is prologue when you think about the recovery we've seen in the context of the decline that preceded it.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. I'm so mad at myself for not getting Jane's Addiction faster. I was like, I could hear the other a couple other songs, and then
I want to know more from Wilson about this generational thing.
Well, you have more of an appreciation for classic rock, and I, get into like the grungy stuff, I guess is what he's saying.
Okay. Yeah. What, Dave?
That was all I was saying. That's it.
All right.
That's it. Nothing to see here. Moving on. Moving on to the stock of the day. We'll hear.
There's miles between us right now.
Exactly. One moment we are happy we are not in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, but instead many miles apart. Right, Carol?
Totally. All right, folks. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We've got about 20 minutes left in the session, so we're going to count you down at the closing bell. Right now, let's get another check on world and national news headlines. Back over to Bob Moon we go. Hi, Bob.
The grungy stuff, Jason? President Trump asserted today that he, not governors, has the authority to open up states and relax social distancing practices adopted against COVID-19. At the same time, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo warned today that reckless behavior could send hospitalization and death rates up again.
You can now go back and look at Wuhan province and look at Italy and look at South Korea and see what they did and see what worked and what didn't work. So let's learn.
The death toll in New York has now topped 10,000, including 671 people who died on Easter Sunday. A member of the crew of the coronavirus-infected USS Theodore Roosevelt died today of complications related to the disease 11 days after the aircraft carrier's captain was fired for pressing his concern that the Navy had done too little to safeguard his crew. The sailor was the first active duty military member to die of COVID-19. The unidentified sailor had tested positive for coronavirus on March 30th and was taken off the ship and placed in isolation in Guam. Energy Secretary Dan Brulette says it's important to not overproduce oil at the moment. President Trump has directed more storage be made available to keep an oil glut from harming the U.S. oil industry.
You can now go back and look at Wuhan province and look at Italy and look at South Korea and see what they did and see what worked and what didn't work. So let's learn.
Brulette told Bloomberg's Kevin Cirilli the U.S. portion of cuts from the OPEC Plus and G20 deal will be entirely market-based. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In-depth analysis.
This is a message from the government about this bank holiday weekend and keeping yourself, your friends and family safe from coronavirus. This bank holiday weekend, do not go out unless absolutely necessary. Do not meet up with anyone outside your household. Do not put the lives of your loved ones in danger. Stay in touch with them on social media or give them a call. Anyone can get coronavirus and anyone can spread it. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
From barbers to dog groomers, at Starling Bank, we'll help you keep your business off the ground. With no monthly fees to weigh you down. Your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank, helping business fly.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 2019, Greg Popovich surpasses Lenny Wilkins to become the all-time winningest coach in NBA history with his 1,413th win.
Is in the books. The Spurs hang on to steal it. Greg Popovich with 1,413 career wins, the most in NBA history.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellett. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks are now trading mixed. Quite a comeback for the Dow, the S&P. They're both lower, but NASDAQ's higher. Let's get all the details as we head over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. Dow and S&P are trading lower while the NASDAQ is in the green as FANG stocks really outperform. Dow's currently down 256 points. S&P's dropped 23, and NASDAQ is higher by 39. The U.S. 10-year yield at 0.75%. Those FANG stocks up 3.8%. Oil is little changed, and gold trades to the highest level since 2012. Semis rose 1.4%, and the VIX is higher by 1%. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, Walmart and Intel, while Caterpillar plunged 8.6% and led to the downside. In other news, Amazon jumps as much as 6.6%. The company is hiring 75,000 more workers to meet demand. And in U.S. politics, Bernie Sanders endorsed Biden for president. Wrapping things up, Ameren reports after the bell. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
All right, I thank you very much, Bill. He mentioned gold, $17.18 the ounce right now. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type SQUAWK, SQUAWK, on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the Drive to the Close. Randy Watts is back with us. Great timing, too, to have him here. He's Executive Vice President and Chief Investment Strategist at William O'Neill & Company. Today we find him on the phone from Miami. Randy, nice to have you back here with us. You doing okay? Your family's doing okay?
They are. I appreciate you asking, and I hope everyone is safe and healthy there in New York.
Yeah, we're certainly we're getting there and certainly dealing with our
Doesn't
our
look like Miami outside my window, though. I'll tell you that much, Randy. It is the opposite at this point.
Yeah, I understand the weather's been quite bad up there.
Yeah, it's pretty miserable today. I was looking back over my notes, and I think you were with us late February, and it was a day where we were all, of course, worried about the virus. We were back in our studio, but we weren't at home. The market was selling off because of concerns about the virus. That was our theme for the day. How do you see the markets right now? We saw a tremendous amount of selling. Randy went into technically a bear market. We've bounced back a lot. How do you see it when you look at all of your charts and you do some analysis?
Well, a couple of things. Obviously, this has been a very, very strong rally. We're up about 27% off the lows in 3 weeks. We would expect either some consolidation here or even a move backwards. This is a much stronger rally than a typical sort of up 9 to 10% bear market rally. I think one thing to keep in mind, though, is we're only in the 9th week of this bear market, and usually bear markets last more than 30 weeks. In addition, at the low, the market was down about 35% on the S&P. A normal bear market takes it down to about down 42%. If you look at where we sit today, this afternoon, the Dow's down about 18% year to date. The S&P is down 15, and Nasdaq's down about 10. So I am a little nervous about two things. First, the time element of what's going on. We're not that deep into it in terms of weeks. And second, we're going into earnings season, and I think earnings season is going to be a lot worse than the street expects.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's go a level down there, because I feel like we're all bracing ourselves for earnings season. But what does bad look like in your estimation, either in terms of percentages or in terms of maybe even a lack of visibility? Because that's one of the things that we've heard so consistently from CEOs as they've given even ad hoc updates, is they just don't know where this is going to go next.
I mean, that's true, Jason. They don't know. And about 15% of the S&P 500 now has suspended guidance for the year. If you look at where earnings estimates are for the S&P 500, at the start of the year, people were expecting the S&P to earn about $175 this year. That number's down to $147. But if you look at it on a year-to-year basis, last year earnings were about $162. So consensus estimates right now are only looking for about a 10% drop in earnings, and I suspect it's likely going to be worse than that.
I want to go back to what you said, though. We're only in the 9th week of this bear market. Usually lasts, a usual typical normal bear market lasts around 30 weeks. Is this normal, though, Randy? Like, there's a logical side of my brain that says, I get what's going on. We shut down the economy. Of course it's going to be really, really bad. But I do wonder, and this is just, I shouldn't just say just, but it's really a timing element, that when we reopen, people get back to work, they will resume spending, that we could see a pretty dramatic bounce back.
I think the key on that is really unemployment. So, we entered this scenario with about 3.5% unemployment. We've done about 16 million jobless claims in the last 3 weeks, which means unemployment today, the real unemployment number is probably in the 13 to 14% range. To put that in perspective, unemployment in the 2009 recession peaked at 10%, and in the 1982 recession peaked at 10.8%. So unemployment's already a lot higher than it was in the last couple of recessions. And I think the question for the economy is how quickly are those people going to get hired back? If we start opening the economy, I don't think that means that all those restaurant, hospitality workers, et cetera, instantly all get hired back. And so that question of job absorption is really what makes me nervous.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's such the big question, right? Is it reopens, to Carol's point, it reopens and people get back out there. But if a restaurant, I mean, this is just very parochial, but like if a restaurant can only seat half the people that it used to because of social distancing,
right,
how many people does it need? Does it, and how many, what's the revenue breakdown and the profit breakdown? And does the fact that there are, fewer people working ultimately mean that there are fewer people spending money? Yes, in general. I just have such a hard time, in part because nobody knows. And it just goes back to this, nobody knows, and yet you have to make investment decisions, Randy.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to be too bearish here. I do think we're going to get through this. I do think the economy is going to recover. We do expect 2021 to be a better year for both the economy and for corporate earnings. But I think the point I'm really trying to make is, one, the market's had an awfully big move in a short period of time from its low. I'd like to see the market digest that a little bit. And second, I just think this going into earnings season right here today, there's a lot of uncertainty. I'd prefer to see us start to get into some of these company reports, see what companies are telling you about profitability before really getting aggressive and adding capital right here.
So what do you do for an investor? You're saying what? Just kind of ride this out a little bit?
Wait for some reports?
I think we're looking for two things. First, I'd like to point out that in this bounce, a lot of the stocks that bounced were not what we would call leadership companies. There were a lot of companies that have been very beaten down the last month or so, and those were the ones rising. The action today is actually more positive in a way, in that a lot of the more high-quality companies are having good days, names like Amazon. I think what we're looking for here is to see leadership stocks and companies start to do better relative to the market, and to start to add some of those names into your portfolio that are going to not only, some companies are even going to benefit from what's going on, whether it's an Amazon, a Microsoft, et cetera, and companies that we think can be long-term holdings. We really don't want to chase some of these beaten down names and hoping they're going to bounce even more than they have already.
All right.
Great stuff.
So smart. Love Randy Watts.
Yep. Love him too.
That's great. All right. Randy Watts, Executive Vice President, Chief Investment Strategist for William O'Neill & Company, joining us on the phone from sunny Miami. Good for him. Happy to hear his voice and that he is safe and well, and some good insights as always.
Taking a ton of notes about his market insight. All right, folks, we will count you down to the closing bell. Just got about 3.5 minutes to go, so we'll have those closing numbers and a look at some of those stocks on the move. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Coffee.
Your local M&S food hall and food sections in our larger stores are open, and we're here for you in these challenging times. Our shelves are restocked regularly with deliveries from our fantastic suppliers, so you can get all the fresh food and essentials you need. For local store information, visit marksandspencer.com. We're all in this together. This is not just food. This is M&S food.
Right now, TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months. Plus, you get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Over 80 Freeview channels, all the on-demand players, and average speeds of 38 megabits per second. Plus, unlimited one-day delivery, thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon. Massive entertainment package, tiny price. So you've more to spend on popcorn? Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk, for everyone. Offer ends 22nd of April, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Monday, April 13th, with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ trading mixed today. The S&P lower by 28 points, as Carol mentioned, finishing well off session lows, down by 1%. The Dow down 325 points. For the Dow, that was a drop of 1.4%. NASDAQ had an up day, turning around in the final hour of trading. The NASDAQ Composite Index higher by 38 points, up by 0.5%. Well, as for the market backdrop, Randy Watts is Chief Investment Strategist at William O'Neill. He was our guest moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
Obviously, this has been a very, very strong rally. We're up about 27% off the lows in 3 weeks. We would expect either some consolidation here or even a move backwards. This is a much stronger rally than a typical sort of up 9 to 10% bear market rally.
Carnival Corp has announced an extension of the suspension of sailings right through June 26. It has also canceled all San Francisco sailings for the rest of 2020. Carnival shares among cruise line stocks today down 7.5%. Royal Caribbean, a rival in the industry, down 16.3%. Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings lower today by 12.8%. Goldman Sachs says U.S. stocks are unlikely to make fresh lows thanks to the, quote, do whatever it takes approach of policymakers. And Fed Vice Chair Richard Clarida says the central bank does have the tools needed to keep the U.S. out of a deflationary trap, even as the coronavirus deals a severe hit to the economy. In an interview on Bloomberg Radio and Television this morning, Clarida said, quote, I think we have the tools to keep the U.S. economy out of deflation and to support the economy through this challenging period. The 10-year yield, 0.75%, gold up 1.3%, $17.17 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%. Again, the S&P lower by 1% today. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Your next move
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Sippy, you got to move. And I'm moving over town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right. Yes, indeed. One day under our belts. Carol Messer along with Jason Kelly. Let's break down that trade on this Monday. Charlie, of course, giving you some of the closing numbers and some of the highlights there. S&P 500, big picture. Most names lower today, despite those major equity averages bouncing off their lows. Still 407 names in the S&P 500 showing declines today. 97 higher, 1 unchanged. You know, Charlie mentioned those cruise lines, Carnival, that CDC extending the no sale. I had missed that earlier, so it's kind of wild to hear that. But basically, the CDC coming out and extending for how long that they could not actually,
have people on their
cruises.
ships.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's really something when you think about the bread and butter business, because that's it's interesting when you think about the hospitality industry more broadly. It's like, okay, well, is business travel going to come back? Is tourism going to come back? Sort of tourist travel going to come back? Is it going to be regional? The thing about the cruise ship business is that's the whole business is cruise ships. It's tourists. It's people getting on a boat. It's a fairly straightforward thing, and it's either happening or it's not.
It's a lot of people in a small. I mean, they're big ships, but nonetheless, it's thousands of people basically in a confined space. So, what's interesting is I was looking at Bloomberg Intelligence. They actually came out with Carnival, and they said that they think that they've got enough cash to face this extended no sale order. So we do know they've been taking a lot of steps to kind of shore up their financial position. But we did see a bunch of the cruise lines among the biggest movers on the S&P 500. So Charlie mentioned Carnival. They were down a bunch. Royal Caribbean was down 17%. Norwegian was down 13%.
Yeah.
Wow.
And these are names that, as we know, have been pretty volatile in the face of all this. And we've had some days where they've gained. They've been some of the biggest gainers. But obviously, this is bad news. I mean, it does. I'm guessing you read it as well in the New York Times this morning. A great column by Ben Smith about Disney and Bob Iger.
Oh my God! Yes.
Just reminding folks of what's going on there at Disney and how reliant they are on both the cruise business and the theme park business, and those are shut down.
Think about it, like content. If you're anything that goes to the movie theaters, right? It's people, a lot of people in one space. Their cruises, their theme, like everything. Their big businesses, sporting events, right?
Yeah.
And that plays into certainly their media. And streaming is certainly maybe some of the upside. But
that's where I was going to go next. Yeah, was the streaming business. I mean, Disney Plus. There was a little bit of a bump last week in Disney shares. Wednesday, I believe it was, when that 50 million figure came out. Mm-hmm. They are benefiting. They're obviously sort of the new kid. It's funny to think about Disney as the new kid, but they are the new kid when it comes to streaming. Netflix, one of your big gainers today, looking at their highest close potentially since 2018. That was a story earlier. That was in part because of a price target raise over at Canaccord Genuity, up to $450 a share from $415. Let me just see where that stock closed. I know that we heard Charlie talk about it a little bit. It
was up 7%, number one gainer in the S&P. So where is it off the price target?
So it's still below 400 at this point. So it's got some room to go. But I got to tell you, we're watching a lot of Netflix at this house. I'm thinking about upgrading. So because I went to try and watch something this weekend, and it's like, nope, you got too many devices going on this account, which checks out. Anyway.
Well, speaking of, let's check out Amazon, because that too is your third biggest gainer in the S&P 500. That stock's up 6.2%. Amazon, several stories, but one that really caught all of our attention is they're going to hire another 75,000 workers.
75,000,
and it's all about demand.
Yep.
I mean, there was, I think, another story that they had about that if you're new to kind of their grocery online, they're not going to necessarily take you on right now because they can't even. I know us, we're trying to get slots, for various grocery services, and even for those that we've been with for a long time, it's like crazy. We're going to talk about that later on. Don't they know?
Oh my goodness! All right, let's check out volatility. The VIX down just a touch today, 0.7%, closing at 41.38. This is Bloomberg.
All right.
Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson. Open up the door. It's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Dave Wilson, our Bloomberg Stocks editor, is back with his stock of the day. Ticker is WDFC, WD40.
That's right. I mean, and you know what it stands for? Water Displacement 40th Formula.
I knew that.
Oh, sure you did. That's how the company's original lubricant was described in a lab book by the chemist who developed the product. The name's also used today for cleaners, rust removal products, degreasers, and even grease. WD-40, the company, was founded in 1953 and went public in 1973. And yes, WDFC is the ticker. That's WD, F for 40, and C for company. While WD-40 shares have risen every year since 2009, they've been mostly lower this year. And earlier this month, the company became a target for the short-selling firm Spruce Point Capital. Now, WD-40's reversal is largely a result of disappointing earnings. The company posted fiscal first quarter figures in January, and they showed profit and sales were lower than analyst average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. Second quarter results came out late Thursday, and WD-40 came up short again. Company cited the effects of the coronavirus in China, which led to a 31% drop in Asia-Pacific sales. And like a lot of companies, WD-40 withdrew its annual forecast and suspended buybacks. You put that all together, and WD-40 shares had their biggest loss since December 2008.
Ouch.
They fell just a bit more than 12% on the day.
Interesting. I did not know that that's what WD-40 stood for. I'm not as smart as Carol. Carol's so handy.
I had no idea.
Okay.
But I know the the cans are like everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Like,
Ubiquitous.
yeah.
It really works. I mean, that's the
It really
beauty of it all.
works.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Always good to catch up with you. We'll catch up with you again tomorrow for your market insights, your chart, and your stock of the day. Let's get out to San Francisco now. That's where we find Ed Baxter, maybe doing some home improvement, spraying down a door here.
Sure.
Hey,
yeah. Everybody knows what that stands for. Everybody.
All right.
Okay. Discussion about who orders the reopening of business is ignited in the U.S., ignited with the president saying he alone has the power to open up states and relax social distancing practices. The president's policy has been to stay away from any national moves on closure, so the question remains who decides and based on what. Meanwhile, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says 6 Northeast governors will coordinate reopenings themselves when they feel the danger has passed. Coronavirus has stabilized across the U.S. CDC Director Robert Redfield says the number of new cases should decline in the days ahead, but
we've got to substantially augment our public health capacity to do early case identification, isolation, and contact tracing, and obviously make sure we have the medical and hospital capacity.
New York City says the number of deaths has plateaued day to day, but Mayor Bill de Blasio says it may be summer or fall before the city returns to some form of normalcy.
We are nearing the peak right now. I think we'll sometime, hopefully this week, we will be able to say that, you'll know when you're at the peak when the next day is actually less than the day before.
And a caution from the director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus.
The way down is much slower than the way up.
In California, Governor Gavin Newsom says things are stabilizing.
Growing, but in a moderate way. The curve is being bent because of you and because of your willingness to continue to stay at home, including this weekend.
But he says the state is not ready to end social distancing yet. And Bernie Sanders has endorsed Joe Biden. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed.
The markets. No, you can't just run screaming from the room.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
But you don't have to manage this alone.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
What is your early read as to the scope and scale of this plan?
Bloomberg Markets. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team? Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the
It's Tune In Sports on this day. On this day in 2019, Greg Popovich surpasses Lenny Wilkins to become the all-time winningest coach in NBA history with his 1,413th win.
Is in the books. The Spurs hang on to steal it. Greg Popovich with 1,413 career wins, the most in NBA history.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, you know, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the
country. Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC studios on TuneIn today.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Down Monday, a rebound for NASDAQ. Turned out to be a mixed day with the S&P and Dow both lower, but NASDAQ advanced 38 points, up by 0.5%. The S&P 500 index did pair losses after dropping as much as 2.5%. Gains in consumer discretionary technology and communications companies offsetting declines in other major groups. S&P down 28, lower by 1%. Again, have been down as much as 2.5%. The Dow down 328 points, down 1.4%. 10-year down 11/30 seconds with a yield of 0.75%. Gold up 1.2%, 17.16 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.8%, 22.58 a barrel. Again, recapping, equities mixed with the S&P down 28, lower by 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's check in with a good friend of ours. Joined us about 6 weeks ago on March 5th, and good Lord, how the world has changed. Stefan Seelig back with us, managing partner for Bridge Park Advisors, former Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade at the Department of Commerce back during the Obama administration. Stefan, how are you?
I am fine. I'm building an ark here in Long Island today and taking 2 of every animal on it.
That sounds like a very good use of time. Listen, everybody's got to use the quarantine in a different way, and certainly the weather has called for it. I mean, 6 weeks ago, we were having a very different discussion. What do you make of it?
Well, you're so right, Jason. When we were together last, we had record high employment levels, consumer confidence was strong, and the housing market was booming, and the equity markets were near all-time highs. And boy, since that time, we have seen a crisis unfold that has both been catastrophic and incredibly fast. And what I find most interesting about it is that crisis was in fact self-engineered as we shut down our economy to save lives.
So does it make it any worse or any better because of that?
Well, potentially, Carol, it means that the recovery may be as swift as the decline. As you know, a lot of the commentators you've had on, your show and on Bloomberg generally have talked about this V, U, and L-shaped recovery. But implicit in that question is, because it was self-engineered, is there at least some visibility to a equally quick recovery? I guess it's my view that that so-called V-shaped recovery, at least in the economy, may be challenging. Which is different than what you might see in the markets, right, which make faster. And last week I think you saw one of the strongest weeks in the equity market since the mid-1970s, right, for a whole host of different reasons. But I think the economy is going to be somewhat slower to rebound.
And so, Stefan, you're talking to CEOs all the time. Your history on Wall Street goes back a long ways, advising, some of the most influential decision makers out there. What are they saying to you, if you can generalize? Because obviously you're going to have a different view depending on what business you're in. But if you're a CEO, what are you thinking right now?
Well, first of all, Jason, I think there is no playbook. So we've never seen an economic crisis like this coupled with a health crisis. So anybody that thinks they have some clairvoyance here, I think, is being somewhat misleading. I think everybody is very focused on when we are going to be able to return to some level of a new normal. And is it going to be fast enough that there's not going to be mass closures of businesses and people will have jobs to return to? And if it is fast enough, is the consumer going to start spending again? Because as you guys know, 70-ish% of the U.S. economy is directly tied to the consumer. And folks are going to be very focused on, one, how has this impacted the consumer both financially, but also psychically in terms of their willingness and interest in spending money.
So when we talk about reopening the world and reopening the economy again, Stefan, I don't know, you hear from the governors, you're listening to the governors, you're listening to the mayors, you're listening to, the president and his team, what do you think? If somebody says to you, well, Stefan, when do you think we're going to reopen? How do you think it's going to play out? What do you say?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. One is it's going to be gradual. So there's not going to be an on-off switch where all of a sudden, mirabile dictu, we're all back at work the next day because either the federal government or the states have said so. I think you will see a phased reopening, both in terms of geographies and in terms of industries. And I think the interesting question is both at the federal level and at the state level, what sort of either guidance or restrictions are going to be placed on folks when that reopening happens, whether it's going to be wearing masks, whether it's going to be certain social distancing regulations, whether office protocols are going to be different. And, we saw that, Carol, we forget, but we all used to go into airports without screening and without security provisions. We all used to go into offices in New York City without checking in first. There may be certain regimes now that are just different post-COVID-19.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I mean, humans are incredibly adaptable. And if we do think ahead to, 6, 9, 12, 18 months from now, maybe we will look back on this. Carol has something to say. I can see her.
Well, it's funny because I had thrown something out on Twitter over the weekend and got some feedback. But this whole idea of kind of having an app that kind of says to you, Stefan, I had a test, here's where I'm at. Like some way of monitoring, every individual who's out there in order to get everybody back to work. My private side says I don't want any kind of app that does that, but my realistic side says, okay, maybe we have to do this.
Well, by the way, and Carol, that's going to be very different in different societies, right? So what South Koreans may find acceptable in terms of impingements on what we might think privacy is going to be different than what we think. And then the question is, are we as a country going to allow a certain level of human tracking and monitoring, to your point, that we might have found unacceptable 2 months ago?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Stefan Seelig, stick with us. We're going to continue this conversation. Love catching up with you. We're going to talk a little bit maybe about the government's response and some of the things you've seen, especially as it relates to trade, which is one of your many areas of expertise. Stefan Seelig is going to stick with us, managing partner at Bridge Park Advisors, also served as Undersecretary of Commerce for International.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks were mostly lower, though the market cut its losses near the close. Investors are nervously awaiting the start of first quarter earnings season. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 329, the S&P 500 dropped 28, the Nasdaq Composite climbed 39. Despite today's weakness, Goldman Sachs thinks we've seen the worst of the coronavirus sell-off. It says the market is unlikely to make new lows as long as the virus doesn't make a resurgence as the economy reopens. Disney's efforts to cut costs amid the COVID-19 crisis is hitting ESPN's air talent. The network is asking its 100 highest-paid employees to take 15% pay cuts. It's a request since most are under contract. Oil ended lower even after the world's largest producers agreed over the weekend to cut output. Analysts say it was not enough to make up for falling demand. Crude finished at $22.41 a barrel, down 35 cents. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Stefan Seelig. Can't wait to get back to that. First, let's get back to Charlie Pellet. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Jason Kelly. Happy Monday once again. The Dow, the S&P lower, NASDAQ higher. Mixed Monday. Bottom line, stocks fell before the start of one of the most uncertain earnings seasons on record as the coronavirus pandemic rattles the global economy. We're not rattled at Bloomberg. We will keep you covered on all the earnings as we work at home right through this coming week when we kick off with bank earnings. But as the coronavirus pandemic hits the economy, concerns are surfacing about deflation. Vice Chairman Chairman Richard Clarida told Bloomberg Radio and Television this morning the Federal Reserve does have the tools to fight deflation.
I think we have the tools to keep the U.S. economy out of deflation and to support the economy through this challenging period.
Goldman says U.S. stocks are unlikely to make fresh lows thanks to the, quote, do whatever it takes approach of policymakers. Strategists led by David Kostin say a combination of unprecedented policy support and a flattening of viral curve has, quote, dramatically cut risks to both markets and the U.S. economy. Amazon.com says it's expanding its hiring spree by an additional 75,000 workers as the online retailer shores up its logistics operation to meet demand from people hunkered down at home because of the coronavirus pandemic. Amazon shares on a down day for the S&P and the Dow. Amazon up today by 6.2%. The 10-year down 13.30 seconds with a yield of 0.76%. Gold up 1.2%. 17.16 the ounce, up $20 today. So gold now at 1,700 plus 17.16. West Texas Intermediate crude. We got the oil agreement over the weekend. WTI down today by 1.2%, 22.48 a barrel. Recapping, equities mix, NASDAQ up 38, S&P down 28, down 1%, the Dow down 328, down 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly, and our guest is Stefan Seelig, Managing Partner at Bridge Park Advisors, former Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade at the U.S. Department of Commerce. That was during the Obama administration. Stefan, with us on the phone from Long Island. Stefan, I want to ask you about trade. With the virus as a backdrop, I do wonder how what's going on and what we saw with kind of the breakdown of supply chains again as a result of the virus coming on top of the breakdown of supply chains off of the U.S.-China trade war. Is there some lasting impact as a result of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, Carol, you're already seeing a relatively severe contraction in global trade across virtually all regions around the world and across almost every economic sector. And that's obviously because of the dampened economic environment that we are, seeing now globally. But I think what you will see in the longer term, and this is obviously not going to happen immediately, is you're going to see supply chains being restructured coming out of this crisis. And for sure, in the United States, I think you're going to see more diversification for supply sources with less reliance on any one particular region or country. So you don't have the sort of concentration risk that in many cases we are experiencing now.
And so, Stefan, it sort of leads me to this sort of big question that we've been asking a lot of folks, especially folks of your stature, which is, as you look on the other side of this, and we're starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll see how bright that gets over the next couple of days and weeks, but as you look on the other side of this, how will the world have changed from your perspective? And you could take that however big, however small you want to take it. What are the ways that the world may change, maybe in ways that we're underappreciating right now in your estimation?
Well, that's Jason, a very, very big question. I think I will just make a couple of points. One is I do think this is going to change how we think about supply chains in the ways I've just suggested, and they will become more localized. Two is I think you are going to, as we are all getting more and more used to working from home, you could imagine a real work-at-home trend that becomes much more pervasive in the economy. And I think clearly you're going to see more remote health care because our health care system, has not been designed to accommodate anything like what we're seeing now. I think you're also going to see a real impact on our relationship with China. And you're already seeing Senator Rubio and others down in D.C., using this crisis as an opportunity to try and enact tougher policies against China, which I think you probably are going to get reasonable bipartisan support for.
Are they right to do that? You know what's, well, let me take a step back, because I'm just listening to our conversation, Stefan. I feel like it's interesting, as you said, the supply chains, more people doing it, on their home territories. But I feel like this virus showed us that all of these populist movements and all of this pushback against globalization, if we ever needed global coordination, a better, sign of it was the virus, right? That if we really could have trusted everything coming out of China, and if China had given us an earlier heads up and, take it across the globe, I think we could have, as a world, a global community, gotten our heads around this in a much more effective way. And we didn't. And I feel like, yeah.
I'm not sure, Carol, those things aren't inconsistent. So, you'll recall what Bob Zoellick said years ago, which is, we need China to be a responsible stakeholder, and which is to say, if China is going to be part of the global economy, they need to play by the rules. And so I think those things are actually internally consistent, which is I don't think we are going to be able to put globalization back into a bottle, as you just suggested. But I do think for those folks that are going to participate in that global system, they're going to have to abide by certain rules of the road, and we're probably going to get much tougher than we have been historically on enforcing those.
Yeah. 30 seconds left. What impact do you think this has on the 2020 election?
Boy, our elected leaders, both at the national and at the state level now, Jason, are playing a game of 3D chess in terms of when are they going to open up the economy. And one of those, one dimension of that, of course, is the health issue and saving lives. The other dimension is, the economy and limiting the amount of joblessness and the decline in our productivity. But the third, of course, is politics. And if they get out too far in front of this and release those restrictions too soon, and God forbid we have a second occurrence of COVID-19, that is going to be awfully politically difficult. So they have a very tough set of decisions trying to weigh all three of those factors. And if they get it wrong, I think it's going to create a real political problem for them in November.
All right. Stefan Seelig, you're the best, managing partner for Bridge Park Advisors. He was with us 6 weeks ago. Hopefully the next 6 weeks will be better than the last. We're counting on that.
Maybe we'll even be in studio. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be great. All right. Let's get to Ed Baxter now in San Francisco. Hey, Ed.
All right, Jason, I want to follow that train of thought. Actually, President Donald Trump is asserting his power to open up social distancing, saying he alone has the power to do so. Meanwhile, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and 5 other governors have formed an alliance to coordinate opening in the northeast of the U.S.
We should start looking forward to reopening, quote unquote, but reopening with a plan and a smart plan, because if you do it wrong, it can backfire. And we've seen that in other places on the globe.
And he says although things have stabilized, there are 2,000 people a day coming into the hospital system in New York State. And the director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, underscores that issue.
While COVID-19 accelerates very fast, it decelerates much more slowly.
CDC says the virus has stabilized. What that means is the increase has moderated, cases not going up or down with volatility as much. That is the case in New York, New Jersey, former hotspots. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom
seem to be stabilizing from a hospitalization and an ICU perspective, but the total number of cases continues to grow.
And all the governors of those states, by the way, say it's way too early to open back up. Side note, the president has retweeted a post that included hashtag fire Fauci. Clarification, again from the White House, saying the president is not firing Dr. Fauci. One of those U.S. cases is Good Morning America anchor George Stephanopoulos, who says he's had mild symptoms.
I've never had a fever, never had cough, never had shortness of breath, never had chills, any of the classic symptoms you've been reading about.
In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
This is a message from the government about this bank holiday weekend and keeping yourself, your friends and family safe from coronavirus. This bank holiday weekend, do not go out unless absolutely necessary. Do not meet up with anyone outside your household. Do not put the lives of your loved ones in danger. Stay in touch with them on social media or give them a call. Anyone can get coronavirus and anyone can spread it. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time? You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker